Mr. Sam Greco, welcome to the podcast.
That was official.
That's very official, very formal.
No,
how are you?
Really good, thank you.
That's good.
Thanks for
That's
having me.
good. Well, let's start from the beginning. Where did you grow up, Sam?
In my mum's womb.
In your mum's womb?
Yeah.
How was that experience?
It was right claustrophobic.
Yeah, slightly. I could
had to
imagine.
wait 9 months before I got out.
Oh my gosh. Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
No, I grew up, cut that in, but no, I grew up in Brunswick.
Yep.
Obviously, born in 67. Growing up in the 70s in Brunswick was pretty tough. It was all about, holding your own. Respect was earned, respect wasn't given. I grew up in, an Italian family household, pretty tough. Growing up with your parents just coming from a new country into Australia. And
Both your parents from Italy?
both of my parents from Italy,
Yep.
yeah. Both of my parents from Italy. So it was a tough upbringing, fairly strict. There's certain things that had to be done. You got up at a certain time. When it was time to eat, everyone was at the table with the family. There was no such thing as someone missing from the table. When it was dinner time, and that was it.
Yeah. So you would say that it was a homely but tough upbringing?
Yeah, it definitely was homely, no doubt about it. And everything was done. That was the rule, hardcore. When people say family, everyone was always together. Everyone did events always together.
Yeah. It's something that unfortunately it seems like we've lost this day and age, just sort of the sense of community that obviously was very present once immigrants after World War II came to Australia. There was this real sense of togetherness that I think we're probably missing now. Would you say this?
Yeah, I believe life's just way too fast at the moment.
Yeah.
Back in I say my days, we didn't have PlayStation games, we didn't have internet, we didn't have anything. We just basically, there was a phone box, there was a black and white TV.
Yeah.
And if you were doing any form of activities, you'd be doing it outdoor, kicking a soccer ball, playing cricket with your mates.
Exactly.
But back into certain times you had to abide by.
Yeah.
Whereas today, life's so fast that we're trying to do 30,000 things at once.
Exactly.
And you do lose focus of the biggest picture. And the biggest picture, when things go down, family's predominantly what's important. But you realize how much we don't spend enough time.
Of course.
There.
And you only realize that in hindsight most of the time as well. So, okay, you grew up in Brunswick. Now, you said it was tough. Were you getting into fights growing up as well in the streets, getting into some argy-bargy situations?
Interesting you say fights. Even though it was a rough area, yes, I did have my fair challenges growing up. But one of the things my dad, with a military background also, my dad implemented me, was, don't bring trouble home.
Yeah.
And one of his favourite sayings, my late dad would say, if you ever get into trouble, if you ever into a fight, and it's not your fault, he goes, you fight to defend yourself and do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
But do not dare come home ever with a black eye, because if you do, he goes, I'll give you another one.
Really?
Yeah.
So even if you got into a fight and you were defending yourself, if you got hurt, he would smack you?
Yeah, he would. Yeah. I wouldn't want to say he would.
Of course.
That was his way of saying, I don't want you doing anything stupid out there.
Right.
And just, obviously, your group of friends is probably the most important thing. He goes, prick your friends wisely.
Yeah. Very interesting. So I'm guessing that growing up, fighting as a potential sport endeavor was never really first and foremost an option for you.
No, I really loved the outdoor sports of playing soccer at the time.
Yes, yeah.
That was my key thing. I had such a love and passion for it that I played for a local side called Juventus. Then I was there with nearly just over 10 years.
Yeah.
And at the age of 15, I was actually selected to play in the first.
Seniors, yeah.
For me, that was a massive feat. One of the youngest players in Australia ever to make the first for a senior side, and made my debut in Brunswick at Gillen Oval. I remember as if it was yesterday, and played against Footscray Just, and always played as a defender because I was a big kid.
Centre back?
Centre back. And I tell you what, when I look back and I look at where is soccer today, I just wish I stuck at it.
Really?
Yeah. I look, the money side of it, the financial side.
Oh, of course.
It's huge. Yeah, it's huge. And such a well-populated sport. It's probably the biggest sport in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, it's crazy that you say that, because there are so many, particularly now, like Australia never used to be known, obviously, for its soccer prowess, particularly in the early days. But now it's like you see so many Australians doing very well in the international scene. It's kind of like now is the time for Australian soccer players to make it big over there, which is quite interesting. All right, so you were playing at Juventus at the time. and you were quite young, 15 again, one of the youngest for to play in the senior side at the time. And were you dabbling in the martial arts world at all at that time, or was it kind of on the down low?
It's interesting you say that. My elder sister, was doing martial arts at the time, and it was during that time when I think I was 8 years old that Dad decided, to not take me out of soccer, but wanted me to do some form of self-defense. He thought it was adequate for me to do it, even at a young age, even though I was playing soccer. And he took me into the dojo with my sister while my sister was training. She'd been training for a little while then, and I absolutely hated it.
Really?
Yeah, I hated it because of the discipline. We've got to wear a karate gi and a belt, and you've got to bow to you. I originally hated it because I hated taking instructions of people.
Okay, yeah. The formalities of it.
The formalities of it, it's the discipline side of it that I didn't sort of engage well with, even though I grew up with a stern father and stern mum, and I held on doing it for about 5 or 6 months. Then it was sort of getting too much for me because soccer was just taking its toll. So I went back to soccer. And it was then at the age of 15, just turned 16, that I wanted a transfer from Juventus, and unfortunately they wouldn't let me go as a free agent. I was out of contract, but there was some clause in there that I couldn't even fight it because my parents didn't have the money to fight it out in tribunals or anything else.
Yeah.
So my dad, typical European, says, fuck this.
Yeah, exactly.
This is you're out.
Yeah.
And made me go back to martial arts. And took me back to martial arts. He had a friend of his who was coaching at the time, and took me back there, and sort of forced for the first month or so. Yeah. Until I'm not even sure. I couldn't even tell you today exactly what it was. The penny just dropped, and I just took a liking to it. And it was slowly building until, from a liking, it was a love for it, until it became such a passion that that's all I wanted to do.
That's all you could think about.
And it was from them that my world just transpired into something great.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating that the man in your life who told you don't come home with a black eye was the one who ended up saying, actually, no, join this dojo here. This martial arts.
He shared the same discipline as martial arts through the military.
Yes.
Obviously, he boxed through the military and did some form of self-defense, but he shared that same discipline factor and was very stern, and that's the way I sort of grew up. And he implemented that in me in general life. Yeah. He was always a beautiful man. I was never abused, obviously, by my parents, but if I was cheeky and I did things wrong, and I tell you what, I got walloped for it. In today's world, you probably wouldn't even hear of it. My dad would be doing 5 lives. That's the case. Those Europeans that are listening to this would understand what I'm saying, but in the good sense. And I, to this very day, I say to my kids, I'm so grateful that my parents put me on the straight and narrow, because in today's world, honestly, I'd either be in jail or dead. That's the honest truth.
Yeah. So there's this sense of mentorship that you get from your parents that, again, potentially some would say that, that doesn't really exist anymore today in comparison to sort of the experiences that you had growing up. Okay, so you've made this transition into the martial arts world, at least initially. It eventually developed into an obsession. Was there a particular point in time where you said, okay, I don't just love this, I actually want to do this as a career, or was it just something you kind of fell into by doing it so much?
No, I think the most challenging thing for me growing up, once I left school, I just scraped through HSC, which is the equivalent to what VC is today. I literally just scraped through with the skin of my teeth. And my parents always wanted me to be an engineer, a doctor, or anything else. I was nowhere near that. Honestly, just give me a soccer ball or give me a bag to punch or whatever, and I was fine. Yeah. I just felt sport was always my path. Trying to convince my parents was probably the hardest thing. I was working with Dad at the time being. Once I left school, I decided to go work as a motor mechanic with Dad.
For how long?
For years. Yes. I became a qualified motor mechanic and ran his business for a while. But it was during that time in the early 20s that I decided that I just couldn't fit. I wanted to be successful in my sport, full contact karate, bare knuckle karate. And I just found it was a bit of a struggle trying to work those long hours, run a business and trying to do that. Yeah. And it came a point in time where, I just sort of put my foot down to a certain degree, and I approached my dad. I said, look, it's time for me to go. I said, I want to pursue my sporting career. I want to make that my career. And my dad's exact words, I'll never forget this. He says, sport, what's that going to make you? He goes, look, I've got this whole business here for you. He goes, I've developed, and I can understand where he's coming from. Yeah. And one of the greatest gifts he could have given me, but it's not what I wanted. it wasn't what I thought was a perfect life for me. And, you know, I always, when I've got a desire to do something, it's not a job anymore. I have fun doing it.
Yeah, exactly,
you know?
right.
So trying to explain to him was quite hard, but I never forget, he looked at the driveway of this big workshop we had in Sydney Road, Coburg, a massive driveway, and he goes, son, he says, if you want to leave, there's the driveway, off you go. She says, but he goes, I know you'll be back. And it was those key words. It was those key words that made me try so hard and be so successful to prove that I'll be able to be successful at doing a sport that I love. And that's exactly what I did. And I can tell you this, I went overseas within 4 months. I saved whatever money I could. I borrowed some money. I went to Japan for a year. I lived at like what they call an uchidesha student, which is a living student. And I had to fend for myself. And the only way I was making money while I was over there was teaching for them.
Teaching, like fighting, like coaching?
Yeah, I was. I was over coaching, taking classes for them. But what I was doing in the meantime, while I was training over there full time, is actually getting ready to fight in a world tournament over there.
Yeah.
So I thought no better place to do it than the actual place itself.
Yeah.
So I trained up, and I never forget, Mum used to say to me, you know, send me photos of your hotel where you're staying. I wasn't staying in a hotel, man. I was staying in a dormitory, you know, with 20 other students. Literally, my room was 2.5 meters by 2.5 meters, tatami mats. I had no TV, no cupboards, no nothing. I was like a judo mat, had a small little mattress with a pillow. One side was like feather and down, and the other side was like dry peas inside. And the reason why I know there was dry peas because I cracked it open, and that's what I can tell you. And that's what I slept on for months and months and months. It nearly took me about 10.5 months getting up, training 3 times a day and trying to teach at the same time. It was fairly hard, you know, in a place where, and people say, you know, lucky bullshit. You know, you create your own success in life.
That's it.
And, you know, in this dormitory, they were putrid. There was, amongst 20 of us, there was a little laundry area in there. There was one washing machine, one dryer that everyone used to wash their clothes in there. There was 2 toilets, which were Japanese style toilets, holes in the ground where you had to squat down. And let me tell you, after a hard day of training where you've been banged up in the legs and everywhere else, you try and squat down. You know, you can squat there, you're not getting back up.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? And you'd hear me swear all the time. I'm like, fuck, I'm screaming, you know. And the showers were putrid. But, you know, it was purely those things there that drove me to the mean of success. And I just wanted to win at all costs. You know, my parents were out of the picture then in my thoughts. I just wanted to win for myself, you know, and it was just close to the 12-month mark. I fought in the world tournament. It was a 64-man eliminator, fight all in one day. You have 5 fights in one day. If you lose first fight, you're out.
You're out.
I got through and won the event. I became world champion in 1994.
How old were you at the time?
Oh, good question. You go back. I'm very bad with maths.
94?
Yeah, 94. You go back with maths.
I'm terrible at maths too.
Yeah, I would have been late 20s, early 30s, somewhere there. And it was quite interesting. I became a world champion, and within the week, I got a call from the promoter from the K1, Sato Kaikan, at the time, said to me, "We'd like to take you out of the venue or where you're at, and we want to put you in a hotel." You know, so all of a sudden my life started to change. I started being in a hotel. From a hotel, I went to an apartment, my own apartment. And pretty much for the next 20 years, I was going backwards and forth, 10 months of the year in Japan, living there. And my life just transpired. And from being a world champion, from nothing to something, but that's when it actually all started.
It's all started,
That's when it all started. Once I became a world champion, it was like, wow. And the Japanese thought, you know, we've got a product here. And that's the thing that I say to people. It's not about being just a great fighter. In order to be successful in life, you've got to be a great mentor. You have to be a great entertainer.
You have to have the total package.
You have to have different facets, you know. And the whole idea, and the reason why I believe that is because of the fact that, you know, you make money while you sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, as opposed to just when you fight.
Yeah.
And then my world just transpired. It's just really, it leaps and bounds. But the biggest stage of my life was yet to come.
Yeah, of course. But it's crazy that even though it seems like it, I mean, the way you're describing as well, it didn't happen overnight for you. It was this was months, even years of hard work, being in like a shack, just trying your best,
being in a shithole.
Being in a shithole.
It was basically a shithole, and that's, you know, it's not somewhere where I favoured to be.
Yeah.
It was somewhere where I where I knew my work had to be done.
Yeah.
And I knew if I got through this, I was going to get through anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know what? I faced adversity. I faced negativity. I faced sickness. I faced everything. And it was just one of those things, just what kept me mentally strong.
Well, I was going to ask you this question, at particularly this early stage, right? Going overseas, trying it out in a different country and obviously having a lot of success. In those early stages doing that, were there ever any doubts in your mind? Were you ever like, fuck, maybe I'm not cut out for this? Was there ever that seed of doubt there? Or were you just, I'm going through this to the very end?
I'm not saying it was a seed of doubt. What I can say, not every day was a great day.
Yeah. Yep.
A lot of people see success and say, geez, he's fucking lucky, that guy. Lucky bullshit. I said to you before.
Yeah.
Everyone sees that end result, the glamour when you're on the stage holding up, the
titles,
prize money or title belt or everything else. But no one sees, when you're sitting in your room, all busted up, the fucking tears running down my face, crying, wondering when the fuck am I going to go home and see my family?
Yeah.
That sort of shit, it fucking hits hard.
Yeah.
It fucking really hits hard.
Yeah, of course.
No one sees that.
No, of course not. Because it's those moments when you face the darkness to a certain degree.
And you know what? You've hit the nail on the head. The word darkness is the key word, because it's a place where most people will go, but very few make it out. Yeah. And I get emotional because I've actually been there and it's not a fucking nice place.
Yeah, of course. No, I understand, because you see it with so many fighters, particularly now, obviously with the advent of like social media and things like the UFC Contender Series and all those boxing, those or any type of fight documentaries where you see sort of what the fighters are going through. I think it's important because it sheds a light on how these fighters or these combatants go through the ringer. Like it's not always just from glory to glory. It's getting kicked in the teeth literally and mentally, and who knows what's happening back at home with the family as well. At the same time, you're away, as you said, you borrowed money, you've come here. It's like all these things are seemingly against you, but to make it out on the other side, that's where the real champion is born, I would say, right? And it sounds like it's the same for you in this case.
It definitely is, and that's the key element. I'm not sure whether you've seen one of my logos that says "I am a fighter."
Yeah.
And that's purely based on not being a world champ. It's got nothing to do with world champ. It's about fighting adversity, fighting harder when the chips are down, and when you're in those dark places. And we're in this fight. You're not alone. We're in this fight together. Your fight's my fight. We fight together, and that's my slogan. And I came through the hard times. People think I've just thought of this the other day, and bang, I've come up with a T-shirt. Fucking bullshit. I say it, and the reason why I do swear, I get very emotional on it, because people make a judgment call based on what they see as the facade. But no one's game enough to have a look behind.
You're exactly right. Well, they don't even bother asking.
No, they don't bother asking. They don't bother asking. They don't bother seeing. So, I suppose I can speak on behalf of most fighters around the world, legitimate fighters that are still going, or retired and still going. It's a really, really fucking tough battle.
Of course.
It's a tough battle every single day to get up and get punched in the head, get kicked in the legs, broken bones, injuries, contracts have gone wrong. It's a business, I understand. And there's winners and losers and everything else. But one thing that you can't take away from anyone who's willing to take that step is the experience. It's that experience of being down here, being up here, being mediocre. You can't take that away from me. You can take my world titles away. You can take them away. My 4 world titles, you take them.
Doesn't matter.
But you'll never take away my experience.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what I'm talking to you about right now.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that as well. Even the mediocre parts of people's careers, let's say. I've even talked to some fighters who say that while there are these crazy highs and there are these devastating lows, but they said a lot of time it's just like, am I going to get a fight? I'm waiting for a fight, depending on what situation they're in. But there's these lull periods where it's just getting up, training, going to sleep, not sure when my next fight's going to be, not sure when the next batch of money is going to come in as well. It's these sort of mediocre experiences as well that where you're actually tested. Because some people could get bored or say like, fuck it, I'm not going to do this anymore. Like this is not exciting. But to get through that and then go through the highs and lows of the fight game is just, I think as you said, it's like you can never take that away from someone. You can take away everything else, but their experiences, they're there for, for everyone to see if they want to, if they want to ask them.
There is a bit of a difference when you say mediocre, the fighters and so on. I find that here in Australia, and that's the key reason why I left Australia. People say you're doing so great. 6-time Australian champion. South Pacific champion. So what? So what? If you want to create greatness in life, you've got to move. And I always say, to get the best performance out of Sam Greco, just try and pull the rug from under him. Make me feel uncomfortable, and I'll show you how I can feel comfortable in an uncomfortable situation. That's the way I've been brought up. That's what I try and pledge and teach my students today. I'll make you feel, my job is to make you feel comfortable in the most uncomfortable situations, because that's what the fucking fight game is about. And most importantly, that's what life's about. So, for the fighters here in Australia that are fighting predominantly in their own circuit, it's not a full-time job for them. And when I say it's not a full-time job, they need a job behind them to earn money, because Australia doesn't pay well.
It's the reality.
That's the reality of it. Key reason, one of the reasons why I left. I'm in it for a good time, not a long time. I had the opportunity to stay here and create greatness here, but for what? I wanted to prove myself to the world, I wanted to prove myself to me, what I'm capable of. And that's the key reason why I took off overseas, to challenge, go on to the best circuit in the world. If I was going to succeed, I'll succeed there. And sure enough, I did. But it came with a lot of work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Of course. And it's crazy to think that, not only have you, and this is not to blow smoke, but not only have you conquered the best of the best here in Australia when you were fighting here, in kickboxing or Kyokushin or whatever it was, you also, you took on the best in Japan. You took on the best overseas. Peter Ertz, Ray Sefo, Andy Hug, I know who was a close friend of yours.
Yeah, they're the best in the world. Those guys were the best in Japan. The best in the world.
Even Lyoto Machida in MMA. So like these figures who people know of now as like these colossal monuments to the fight game. You went out there and you took them on as best as you possibly could. Not many fighters can say that. And unfortunately, some fighters don't even have the opportunity, even if they are at that level. So there's obviously an interplay there. Before we go into sort of the details of Japan and heading overseas, in Australia, you are, I believe, mentored and taught by one of Five Fit's greatest here, Paul Fifield as well. How was that experience being with Paul?
I'll be honest with you, every time someone brings up his name, there's not a bad word I can say about that guy. To me, again, father figure. It was an absolute father figure to me. It was a godsend that I fell into his hands to go and train with him. I was training with obviously the late Dana Goodson at the time, with Stan and everything else. And obviously when Stan and I fought it out for...
crazy fight.
Yeah, for that crazy fight. And I ended up beating him. It was all over for him. And it was time for me to change. And it was probably the best thing I ever did, finding Paul. A man who's just so intriguing. And I'm not saying it, because I know him. He's just so intriguing. Just some of the stuff that, some of the life lessons that I've learned from him are amazing. Obviously, the training's been phenomenal. But you knew that if whoever trained under Paul, was going to come out super, super fit and super sharp and super strong, and you had a fight on your hands. And I was so grateful to be part of his team. I still speak to him today. The guys just taught me so much about life and everything else. And, when you have a coach isn't just a coach. A coach is a mentor and a friend, a father figure. He's a man that I can turn to any time. And whoever trains under him today, by God, just get as much knowledge as you can out of him, because the guy is a walking library. Yeah.
And do you think that a lot of the, from what I understand, obviously Paul liked to have a lot of fun, but at the same time he was a disciplinarian, and he led by example.
Oh, he was the biggest fucking jokester in the world. Him and Tosca were unbelievable. Fucking Tosca, you fat fuck.
He's gonna come in soon.
Tosca and I used to have wars, but it was inspiring. Yeah. We had some great wars. And
who got the better of each other?
We'd get the better of each other. It was quite interesting. But every time I told Paul, because Tosca would be a dickhead for some reason, I'd say, Paul, tell him to pull up. Paul would go, all right, turn around and go, Tosca, keep going.
Well, can I tell you something very quickly? He told me to tell you this as well. He said every time you guys sparred or anything, that you would always go, Paul, he's going too hard on me. He always called you a whinger.
He called me a whinger, but he doesn't remember that, we're sparring one day, and I don't know how the hell he bit the top of my head, but he bit the top of my head. So it was on for the young and old. So we punched on, and we wouldn't listen to Paul. So Paul's turned off the the timer. I think the round went for 8 minutes. Who knows? And then by the time we finished, we were both fucked.
Fantastic.
And I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to talk to him. He didn't want to talk to me. And then I said to him I'd get him back. But so I waited, and he decided to do some weights in the other side of the underworld there, and he was doing bicep curls, and I saw him from the corner of my eye, and I just sneaked up behind him, gave him such a leg kick. I dropped him.
While he was
while he was doing things,
How can you do that?
We take no prisoners there, mate. We take no fucking prisoners. And I remember him hitting the ground, and I could hear his, Greco, you're fucked, and I'm, fuck you. We walked out. But, to this very day, we talk about Tosca Petridis. Yeah. Absolutely love the bloke.
Of course.
He's like a brother to me.
Yeah.
And honestly, those wars that we had were unbelievable. We worked in clubs together also, so we shared fists in clubs also.
Oh my gosh!
He's an amazing athlete, an amazing kickboxer. Did the world of good for Australia. One of our greatest also, and probably under-recognised if that's the word here. I'm so grateful that he was part of our team also.
Well, they say iron sharpens iron. The fact that you guys were like going at it and pushing each other to the absolute limit in those sparring sessions, I'm sure, it only contributes to the success of the fighter, really, because you're in the fire constantly. So I think and people have said that before, that, that Tosca, it's either one thing or another. It's both extremes, right?
Yeah.
He's never going to half-ass something.
No.
So I'm sure that was a lot of fun. So, sort of in that vein as well, talking about not having a nemesis, but someone who you can work with and that you both sort of gain something out of. Do you think there are any fighters, both here in Australia and when you're fighting overseas, that you could say was a good rival, a rival that forced you to push yourself, whether that was in training or whether that was actually having fights with them in the centre stage?
Well, there's been a few fighters that are really made me flip in terms of pushing myself.
Yeah. That
extra mile, and made me think about life differently also. And one of them was a great friend of mine, the late Andy Hug.
Yep.
If anyone knows, full contact karate and K1, Andy Hug was a living icon then. We lost him back in 2000. Very, very sad, very close friend of mine. We lived together for many, many years in Japan. We shared a lot. And our training sessions predominantly, the amount of things I learned from the guy, and he had this no-die attitude.
Yeah.
Fuck used to scare me at times, and I either joined in or I was left out. And he just taught me to join in and just keep working hard. And guys like him, very far and few.
Yeah.
Very far and few. I probably can count them off 2 or 3 fingers, to be quite honest. And then you've got the likes of, the Peter Ertzes of the world, who, 4 times, 4-time K1 champion, Nesta Hust, those guys have been great mentors. When I say great mentors, we're virtually the same age, but just guys to look at, admire, and just work out what they were doing right and what I was doing wrong, And what it was that 1%, which I had to work out. And mate, I fought them all. I've beaten them, and I've got beaten by them, and we've drawn with some of them. So, in terms of that, but even the caliber of fighters that I fought, were all the best level, top level, and I either beat them, draw against them, or lost against them. And, overall, when you count my bare knuckle fights, my K1 fights, and MMA fights, it's 147 fights.
Yeah,
it's a lot of fights.
Yeah. And you won the majority, I think 131?
And it's not, and I look at that, people often ask, what is probably your hardest fight? Every one of them played an important role into where I am today. I've got some great memories that really sparked things up in my life.
Yeah.
And then the rest were just fights, and I totally understand that. But overall, going back to your question in terms of mentors and guys like that, Andy Hug, the Peter Ertzes of the world.
Yeah.
Man, in life, and I say this to any young kid out there, it's important to have role models.
Of course.
It's important to have mentors, whether it be a family member, whether it be a sporting celebrity, whether it be anybody that you can look up to and thrive to be not like them, because that position's already taken.
Yeah, and that's them.
But better than them.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
People go, I want to be a Sam Greco. Mate, you can't. That fucking position's taken.
Yeah.
Be better than me.
Right.
When I train my students, I don't want you to be like me. I want you to be better than me.
Yeah.
Because that's what makes my soul successful.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and puts money on the table for you and puts food on the table for you. Sorry,
Family,
money in your pocket and food on the table. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's interesting that you say that, because I guess nowadays people have this I guess it can be a misconception, but it's definitely a common perception amongst a lot of boxing fans in particular, that there are fighters out there who don't want to risk losing, so they pick, or they're very careful with who they fight, or they want to protect their zero, as they say. But it seems like your generation of fighters the best. Like, as you talk about yourself, Peter Ertz, Ray Stefo, Andy Hug, right, even Tosca as well. You just fought everyone. You wanted to, and it's funny that you say that. You're like, I won, I lost, I drew, but at the same time, it didn't really matter. You're like, I'm fighting these guys. What an exciting time. There
was no such thing as a padded record growing up.
Yeah.
In today's world, yes, there is padded records, but remember one thing.
Yeah.
Everyone gets found out.
Eventually.
Everyone gets found out.
Yeah.
You can tell me Mayweather's 50-0, whatever. Partly padded record, if you ask me.
You reckon?
Partly. I'm saying partly.
Okay, partly.
To a certain degree.
Yeah.
When I say padded record, carefully choosing your fights.
Right.
Unfortunately, in K1, you didn't have a choice.
You have the choice, yeah.
You know, my first fight, coming from bare knuckle with no head punches,
Yeah.
all bare kicks to the head, knees to the head, yes. Coming from being a world champion in Soto Kaikan to my first fight in Japan in K1, was the pinnacle of kickboxing worldwide.
Yes.
You know,
the celebrities.
My first fight was a guy by the name of Masaki Satake, who was, I didn't know, had no idea who he was until I read up on him.
Yeah.
And I found out he was the Japanese icon. He had his own TV show, his own cartoon.
When did you find this out? Like how long before?
Found that through some of my friends in Japan, sending me stuff which I had to get translated, transcripts getting translated, and I thought, what the fuck? What am I doing? What am I fighting? And I remember I was training under Dana Goodson, the late Dana Goodson then. And we'd only been training for 3 months. And he says, we're fighting the #1 guy, world champion. You're going to be the main event. I go, that's my first fucking fight.
Yeah. And they just threw you in there?
And they just threw me in there. Because as far as the Japanese were concerned, because I won the world title over there in bare knuckle, they thought, this guy can do well kickboxing.
Yeah.
So I went over there, and with literally 3 months of training, I went over there and I knocked Satake out in the second round, broke his orbital. And he pretty much retired after that fight. And it was, if you ever get to see that fight, if anyone gets to see it, you'll see the crowd absolutely silent, crying.
You've knocked out
screaming
an icon.
out for their icon, you know, what the fuck's gone wrong? And the promoter with his jaw like this.
Gobsmacked.
But it was interesting, that particular fight there, that's what I was saying to you before, when I won the World Karate World title, that set the stage.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden I've stepped up into kickboxing, and I had my first fight, I knock out their champion. So what does that say about me?
Yeah.
Now the real fucking work's gonna start.
Yeah.
So they were coming up with some good bouts, and I remember my next bout was like Peter Ertz. I go, who the fuck's Peter Ertz? And they go,
my gosh.
Well, let's have a look. He was a Muay Thai champion.
Yeah.
He was already this champion, that champion. I'm thinking, what the fuck? These guys are feeding me to the lions.
Yeah.
Fucking on to the next race. Let's go.
Exactly,
you know?
yeah.
And I remember going 5 rounds with Peter, busting Peter up. Peter wins it, drops me with body shots. I get back up, fight on. But I just realized that day that when I got knocked down, the moment I got back up, the crowd just went berserk.
Yeah, and that's when you gained a lot of respect.
That samurai, that warrior, and it was coming back out.
Yeah.
And I fought on, and they just went ballistic. I got dropped again. I got back up, kept fighting on right to the end. You know, and to my amazement, not to my amazement that Peter won, he deserved to win it, and there was no two ways about it. But Peter did say to me, he goes, mate, you're one of the hardest guys I've ever fought. And he goes, with your second, he goes, what are you going to be like in 10 fights time? You know, and sure enough, it was just one gun after the other that I was fighting. And you didn't fight him once. You could fight him twice.
Yeah.
And then in Grand Prix, you have 3 fights in one day.
Exactly.
I was used to the 5 fights in one day, so that didn't concern me. But you're fighting monsters, man.
Yeah, and you're also selling out arenas. Like that's
amazing.
Amazing. Like you got
100,000 people. It was unbelievable. You know, I fought in some of the biggest crowds in the world.
Yeah.
And just walking out, you know, people say it's nerve-wracking. Yeah, it's fucking electrifying.
Yeah, of
man.
course, right.
It's electric. This is what you've trained for.
It's goosebumps.
This is what you do. You know, and you know, even that walk to that ring. I thank the Heavenly Lord all the time, and I'm grateful for everything that He's given me and everything that I've done and keeping me healthy and keeping me strong. And I always pray that both fighters walk in healthy, come out healthy.
Of course.
May the best man win. I leave the victory in his hands. And
that's
you
it.
know, and that's it. So, yeah, it's you know, fighting in front of these mega crowds is probably something that we probably won't see.
Might not see
K1 ever again. It's around in very small drips and drabs.
Yeah.
But the organisation I'm with at the moment, Senshi, is a sort of an offshoot, which we talk about later on. But they're trying to set the stage for the world at the moment.
Yeah, and you're doing a lot of coaching with them.
Yeah,
So Well, we can talk about that in a moment, because I just want to you mentioned the walkout, and I've asked a couple of former fighters and current fighters sort of their mentality going into fights. And some people like to say, like, you know, I feel fine. They have odd habits. Like some people can sleep before a fight, like right before, or they come out and they're really nervous. And what's going through your mind even like in big fights and even in sort of just local fights as well coming up? What was your headspace like leading up to the fight?
My headspace was always good if I had a good camp.
Right. Okay.
I had nothing to worry about.
If you're prepared.
Yeah, and the majority of times I would be prepared. If not, sometimes I'd be over-prepared, which can be a little bit dangerous too. So my headspace was always good. Was I nervous? Fuck yeah, man.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how many fights you have. If you're not nervous, if it's nerves in a good sense, it's nerves that keep you on your toes, keep you sharp.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I used to have a ritual. You know, I was very superstitious with, you know, the colours that I wore. Colour underwear that I wore was always black.
Really?
Always.
Had to be. Why black? Why black?
Black.
Yeah, just straight up, just black.
Yeah,
okay.
It was black.
Yeah.
The corner that I wanted to come out was majority was always going to be red. I always wanted to come out of the red corner. I had a ritual of prayers that I did before it.
Yeah.
And what I did, the way I taped my hands, everything. I had a sequence.
Yeah.
But it worked for me.
Yeah.
You know, people could look at me and say, geez, that's weird, but each to their own.
Yeah, exactly.
It's what got me through.
Yeah.
It's what got me through.
It's psychologically securing.
Yeah. And exactly right. And you need those little 0.5 and 1%ers to just keep latching on and keep building up to build that strength. Yeah. Remember, you're going to war with a fucking guy that's been training just as hard as you, if not harder.
Yeah.
You're going to beat each other up.
Yeah.
You're going to have coffee. Would you like 2 sugars with that? It's not that. You know, there's the beautiful thing about, and I really mean this from the bottom of my heart, the most beautiful thing about K1, there was such respect between the high caliber fighters. It was ridiculous. You'd talk to each other before the fight. You'd have breakfast with each other before the fight. If you
breakfast before the fight? Wow.
I want to say before the fight, not obviously the day before, but in that fight week, you'd see each other, you'd converse with each other. Come fight day, it was like, who the fuck are you?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. It was like switched on.
Yeah.
By the time you finished your fight, you're drinking again together.
Yeah, I heard in an interview with Hammer that you had, you said that, you know, everyone was back on the same bus.
Yeah, everyone's back on the same bus. Everyone's going back, having a drink, having a party, doing whatever. But it was such comradeship, was such, we were soldiers, man. Yeah. Soldiers at war constantly, but we're warriors. We were guys that respected each other and we respected the sport we were doing.
And is that something, do you think, that Japan itself as a nation, but as a people group as well, that they fostered that level of respect?
Yes, you're 100% right. They do. They did, and they still do. To what degree today, I'm not really sure. But in our days, it was like being at home with your parents, and you weren't allowed to fuck up. Well, at press conferences, you had to wear suits at press conferences. Yeah. You were told what to wear. So everything was presentable. You know, they had millions and multi-million-dollar sponsorships, and they're not going to lose those because of you being an
idiot. Yeah. And was the concept of trash talking ever a thing back then for you guys?
No, it was very, very, very rare that you ever saw trash talking. And if you did, they'd pull you up straight away.
Really?
Yeah, they'd pull you up straight away. It was to a certain degree. You really had to be careful, and there was, you could probably see most of our fights, and I remember most of them that. I can't remember anyone really trash talking anybody.
Yeah. It was
because,
verboten.
As I said to you before, you'll get found out.
Of course.
You can trash talk.
What's the point in trash talk?
I think it's just a waste of energy. Conserve that. If you've got energy to trash talk, conserve it. keep it for better things in there.
Well, actually, just on that note, you talked earlier about sort of becoming how important it is for a fighter to be the total package, so to speak, not just a great fighter and a good sportsman, but also have the ability to speak, be a marketable product. I've heard you talk about this before. It's crazy that someone like you could be a marketable product in a world where something like trash talking was completely out of the picture. Like, how do you sell yourself outside of the quality of your fights? Well, it's how you look as well, the fact that you've come from Australia, and the fact that your fights were so entertaining, and most importantly, you're getting up. Every single time someone knocks you down, you're getting up. They respected that. So would you say that that was the main thing that sort of resonated with the crowd for you?
Yes, it is. You're 100% right, Matt. But I owe it to someone. And that is my manager, Graham Burke. And I really mean this. When I met him back in '95, when I fought Stan here and beat Stan here, here's a guy who's multi-millionaire, has got everything that he wants in life, and owners of theme parks and all the Village Road cinemas and film roadshows, films and everything else. What the fuck would he want with me? Why would he call me up and call me to dinner after 3 days after the event? I didn't know him. I knew he was sitting ringside with Kerry Packer and going back. It was my last bare knuckle fight on Christopher Cronus' show. I fought a guy by the name of Bob Crawford from Queensland, a copper from Queensland, and I knocked him out in the first round with a knee to the head, knocked him out, rendered him unconscious. He was and where his head fell is where James Packer and Kerry Packer and Graham Burke and Jeff Fennick were sitting, and Christopher Cronus was sitting there at the same time. And Kerry turned around to Graham and goes, "Who the fuck is that? That guy's an animal." Still to this very day we talk about it. And it was that fight there that sort of changed my life, that gave me the diversity. And I'll explain it to you. Is 3 days after that fight, even though the guys come into the change rooms, Kerry and all that came and introduced themselves after the fight, because I was so happy that I'd won, I really didn't realise who I was shaking hands with at the time. I knew who they were, but I didn't know who Graham was. And then 3 days later, he invited me to dinner with my wife to celebrate the victory. And I'm saying to my wife, "What does this guy want me to come to dinner?" And we just started talking. Within 15 minutes of the conversation, he just said to me, "Sam, well, what do you want to do with yourself? You're so athletic. What do you want to do with yourself? You've got a great look and everything else." And I say, "Graham, I just want to be the best at what I do whenever I do it. But I'm finding it hard because I'm working and trying to train at the same time." And that whole aspect that I was talking about earlier in the conversation. And he says, "Okay," he goes, "Well, what does Sam Greco need in order to achieve those goals? We're training full time." Well, obviously I don't need to work. I need to train full time and so on. And he says, "No, I'm talking about financially." He says, "Do you have a figure in mind?" I got no idea what you're talking about, And I never forget this. What a man. I mean, there was a menu at the Botanical in Domain Road there in South Yarra, and he's ripped the menu, the top page of the menu, and he's pulled out a pen from his jacket, and he's written a figure on the paper, and he's just slid it across to me. And my wife and his wife were just chatting away, and I've looked at it. I nearly fell off my fucking chair. I really did. And then the little wog came out of me, and I pushed it back. It said, "No, thank you, Graham, we'll be fine."
Why?
In my own head, I'm thinking, this guy's trying to buy me. I'm not going to be bought by someone. But I actually didn't realise the motive of why he's doing it. About 20 minutes into the conversation, probably even less, I started to realise what this guy was trying to do. He was trying to give me a base. He was trying to give me a lift to better myself. He didn't need the money. It was about him helping someone who needed help. But also, here's a man who constantly is on the phone 24/7 with America, with all over the world, doing film deals and everything else, constantly in an office, facing challenges, adversities. Kickboxing was one of his passions. So I was giving him a release. By being or managing Sam Greco, I was actually giving him an escape from his everyday world. I didn't see this until later in the conversation. And I pulled it back across. And I said, "We've got a deal. We've got a deal." And if it wasn't for Graham, I don't know where I'd be. And that's the honest truth. I really mean this from the bottom of my heart.
And was he a manager from that point on?
From that point on, I still speak to him to this very day.
And
that's a
testament to his
still
character.
my manager in my head. And we're going back 30, 40 years, and he showed me the other side of life that I'd never seen before. But one of the biggest things he taught me some of the greatest lessons, which I'll share with you, is that one of the first questions he asked me, he goes, "Do you read?" And here's a young kid. I can read. Yeah, I read Blitz magazines, I read martial arts magazines.
Yeah.
He goes, no, do you read? I go, yeah, Graham, I do. And he says, no, do you read novels? Do you read autobiographies? Do you read this? Do you read that? I thought an autobiography was about a car. Honestly, that's, you understand, I know it sounds funny, but you're just going through stuff, you know. And so he already knew what he was going to do. And I remember when I left that night, within 3 days, I had 2 novels. One was a Kerry Packer, Life and Times of Kerry Packer, which he wanted me to read. And so I'll put that aside 1 minute, but I'll go back to one of the other things he said to me. He says, besides saying, do you read? He said to me, oh, no, I can go on. So I'll talk to you about the books 1 minute. Yeah. But I remember started reading the books, and we went to dinner. It was about 2 weeks later, and he says, oh, how'd you go with the books? Did you finish them? I go, yeah. Which I didn't finish them. I read probably 2 pages. He says, oh, what's it about? And I just started sweating. I'm thinking, God.
And you can't lie to him.
No, I'd never lie to him. Yeah. Never lie to him. Mm-hmm. So I was honest with him. And I remember he pulled me up. He says, listen here. He says, the reason why I get you to do this stuff and read, know about politics, so the industry that I'm in, there's such a diversity of people that I want you to meet. Yeah. From movie producers to stars to celebrities to this to that. He says, I want you to be able to have a conversation. And no truer words, I kid you not.
Just have a conversation.
I started reading the paper as much as I hate it. Yeah. Started reading books, I started reading novels. I didn't finish all of them, but I finished most of them. Yeah. And then I started taking a liking for it, and I started being able to sit down with people and not just talk about, fighting was the last thing I wanted to talk about. I'd be able to talk about, hey, what do you know about politics? What do you know about this guy here? What do you know about that? What do you know about what's happening in friggin' Europe? Yeah. That sort of stuff. And it sort of opened up my mind. Yeah. A lot, and I was able to converse with people about different topics, and all of a sudden I became interested in other people's lives. Yeah. I wanted to know why you're so successful. Yeah. Tell me, I'm not going to do it. Just tell me how'd you do it? Yeah. So it was all those things that he taught me, and true to those words, it was about making smarter choices. And on the topic of making smarter choices, I'll never forget, there was a kickboxing event which Christopher Cronus was holding, and Graham would always be front and forward, front row. There was no two ways about it. Loved his thing, loved entertaining people, irrespective of whether it was 10 people or 30 people, he'd take them all. Mm-hmm. But we'd all have a beautiful dinner before that and then go to the event. Yeah. And then we'd go out for drinks. I'll never forget this particular Saturday, he asked me to get to the dinner a bit earlier, and I said to him, Graham, I have a bit of a problem. He says, what's that? I said, I've got to do a couple of chores I've got to do at home. So do you mind if I miss the dinner and meet you at the event? And we've been doing this for a bit. Yeah. And he says, what's so important that, I said, Graham, I don't even worry about it. He goes, go on, you can talk to me. And I go, no. He goes, tell me. So I said, Graham, don't laugh. I said, my lawn's about knee height at the moment. I said, I keep putting it off and I've got to cut it. Yeah. So I'm just finishing up now. I'm going to race home. I'm going to do that. It'll take me about an hour and a half, this and that. And he started laughing, and he goes, you're going to go and cut the lawn, are you? And I said, yeah. He goes, all right, no worries. So that's fine. He goes, I'll see you at the event. I said, thanks, Graham. Boom, and I hung up the phone. Within about 10 minutes, he rings me back. He goes, Sammy, he says, let me ask you something. He says, have you ever inquired what it costs to cut lawn? And I said, no, Graham, you're not going to do this. I know what you're going to do. You're going to try and pay for me. Yeah. And he says, not at all. He says, find out how much it costs to cut lawn. I said, where are you going with this, Graham? And he says, just find out, let me know. Don't even let me know tonight when you come here. He says, let me know Monday morning. Anyway, cut the lawn. What I thought would take me an hour, took me longer than an hour. By the time you get your lawnmower out, get the petrol, you mow the lawn, you clean the edges, trim the edges, blah, 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 whatever it is, wash everything down like a typical wog, everything else, have a shower, whatever. It took probably 2.5 hours, right? Yeah. And so I did underestimate that time. But I remember going to the event. We had a great time. It was a great show. We went to have drinks. Come Monday morning, I rang Jim's mowing service. I ring Graham. His secretary answers the phone. And I said, can you put me through to Graham? She puts me through. So he says, you got news for me, son? And I said, yeah, Graham. I said, you want to know? I'm going to let you know. And he says, how much? I go, $50. That was then, yeah.
Yeah.
And he went silent. I said, you there? He goes, yep. He goes, I'm here. He goes, are you there? I go, yep. He goes, $50. He says, what's your time worth, Sam? And I went quiet. He goes, Sammy, can you hear me? I go, yeah. He goes, what's your time worth? And he said, worth more than $50? I said, 100%. He says, I'm going to teach you something in life, Sam. He says, do what you're good at, pay people what you're bad at, and you'll never fucking go wrong.
Do what you're good at, pay people what you're bad at, and you'll never go wrong.
And you'll never go wrong. Do what you're good at, pay people what you're bad at, and you'll never go wrong. So in other words, what I was trying to, for a $50 investment, I would have had that lawn cut, but I would have been away from there with someone else, mingling with business people, making connections, making potential connections. Well, I'm not losing that window of opportunity. He goes, and that's what life's about. So he taught me some really, really valuable lessons. And still to this very day.
It sounds like he was on top of being obviously your manager, and you talked about Paul earlier being that mentor figure, but he was also that strong.
Without a doubt, very strategic, dealt with people all over the world, found the Japanese one of the toughest to deal with. You know, them nodding their head can be a no.
Yes. Oh, really?
Yeah, it could be a no. You just got to be able to read them right. And he'd done a lot of business with the Japanese. He always told me they were ruthless, but he says, you know, you're the good guy in this business. I'm the bad guy. He goes, let me always be the bad guy.
So he allowed you to be the face, be the person.
Everything.
And it's fascinating to hear that, you know, because again, it seems like he was, and you were ahead of the curve in the sense that you were being taught to do things that went beyond the scope of just fighting. As he said, like business savvy. Learn how to read, learn how to speak, have a conversation with someone. I think I'm going to take that as well. Just know things so you can have a conversation, because you don't know what doors are going to open. And in your case, I mean, that happened quite drastically when you went from obviously from the fight world into, you know, going into professional wrestling as well, then getting movie deals and whatnot. I mean, these principles that were laid as a foundation sort of actually had the opportunity to flower in these different creative pursuits that you ended up, you know, going for. Do you think that sort of that transition into those things like professional wrestling and acting was in large part determined by the foundation that Graham set for you?
100%. The foundations are everything. The strength of foundations are predominantly what holds things up. No different to a house. Strong foundations, you can build whatever you want on it accordingly. Weak foundations, you can try and build whatever you want. There's a good chance you'll get cracks and fall. So, of course, foundations predominantly, the strength of the foundation determines whether you're going to do it, and if you do it right, and how long it's going to be up for. Right. So yeah, I take my hat off to Graham in a very, very big way. You know, along with my trainers such as Paul and Dana and et cetera, and my martial arts trainers too. So, you know, everyone's played a part, but the truth of the matter is you never stop learning. I'm still learning to this very day. I'm learning being here right now. You know, so the day you think you know it all is the day you're going down. You never stop learning.
You got to be humble.
You've got to be humble in, you know, you always got to be humble. Humble in defeat, humble in victory. You know, humble in life. And I'm not afraid to give people advice. You know, often you hear people say, oh, don't worry about him doing, no, why? It's fine. If I could help someone, it's not all about financials all the time. It's not about finances all the time. Sometimes, you know, in my line of work, even with I'm a fighter, it's, you know, be careful what you say to people. You know, sometimes all people need is, mate, is a hug, or sometimes need people is a word. A shake of a hand, a smile. G'day, how you going?
It makes a huge difference.
It makes a massive difference in today's world.
Because you don't know what they're carrying, obviously.
No, you don't know. That's why I'm saying everyone's fighting a battle that you and I don't know about. That's why I've got to be careful the way I talk to people.
Of course.
You know, and that should stand to reason in
any scenario.
Any scenario, any life, doesn't matter where it is around the world.
Yes, absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. Now, so you firstly, how are we going for time, Mr. Chef? Are we going okay?
55 minutes.
Okay, beautiful. So it's yeah. Okay, so I just want to it's fantastic. I love it. So all right, so and you stopped a couple before, so don't worry. Or one. Okay, so obviously we can continue talking about sort of your amazing fight achievements, whether in K1 or in the MMA world as well. I do want to find out a couple of things. Number one, how was that transition into MMA specifically from K1? Was that something that you always down the line always thought that would be a possibility, or was it just something that again happened naturally for you? What was the thinking behind that?
I'll be honest with you. To me, because we're one of the greats of the K1 world,
Yes.
and we achieved so much, there was a company called Pride,
Yes.
who's probably the equivalent of what UFC is today, but without that big stage. And it was very, very popular. And it was a rivalry always against K1. And because they used to compete for seats and ticket sales and everything else, they decided to put a show together. And K1 decided, or the promoter, Kazuyoshi Ishii, decided to offer us MMA fights, mixed martial arts fights. Now, mind you, here's a guy that's come from bare knuckle karate to, hey, we think you're good, come to kickboxing. He's like, whoop, I've been thrown in there. Here's my first fight, fighting the world champion. He's like, fuck. And before you know it, 30, 40 fights down the track, now you want, he goes, hands up who wants to fight MMA. And in those days, there was no, you can kick a guy in the head on the ground. You can stomp on him, you can do all that.
Arguably way more ruthless than what the UFC is now.
So they said, who wants to do it? And I think I got too many punches in the head, but I put my hand up. I said, I'll do it. I'll fly the flag for K1.
And you had any training in terms of on the ground stuff?
No, I had very little training. But I do it on the condition that they brought over the best trainers in Japan. And I'll be able to train for them for 3 or 4 months or whatever it took, And sure enough, I put up my hand, they agreed, and they brought over the best trainers. And I lived in Japan just training non-stop daily, 2 or 3 times a day, just doing jiu-jitsu, wrestling, kickboxing, boxing. We did the whole lot because MMA sort of, it's all the facets of martial arts it incorporates. So, and I never forget. And who was my first fight? Masaki Satake. My first MMA fight, and it was a draw. You know, I thought I won it, but it was a draw. But having said that, you know, I had sort of a half a dozen MMA fights, but I fought the likes of, you know, Heath Herring, ex-UFC boy, which I beat.
You beat him,
Lyoto Machida, which I went the distance with. I thought I beat him. We tried to get a rematch. They wouldn't give us a rematch. You know, I fought a few other guys there too, but, you know, I had no experience as much as these other guys, but damn if I was going to let it go and, you know, and not do it. For me, it was about doing the whole circle of martial arts, that whole martial arts life. You know, gone right around. And it was intriguing. It was tough. I wish I was doing it when UFC came to town.
Do you think that would have been an avenue you would have
definitely. Look, if internet was around when K1 was around, I'd have friggin' 100 million followers. You know what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, and let's briefly touch on, you've mentioned it before, but the status of K1 fighters, particularly your level with Peter Ertz and whatnot, and that caliber of fighter, the status was that of, was equivalent to a major Hollywood celebrity. You were royalty.
It was royalty.
I've heard you've mentioned as well that people were bringing bags to your, carrying your bags to training, and essentially they're just worshipping these fighters. Psychologically, was that just way overwhelming for you once that started to happen, or was it easy?
When it first started to happen, I'm thinking, wow, when we get bags of presents left at our doorsteps, you know, it didn't matter where you went, you know, you'd get treated like royalty, you'd have your own cars. The Yakuza were unbelievable there in Japan. They'd always look after us.
Really?
No, they're unbelievable.
Were they a big part of that?
Oh, they're a massive part. They're a massive part of Japan. Then I could only say great things about them, and that's the honest truth. They always looked after us. You know, even if they took five K1 fighters, it would be all separate cars and well looked after and well respected. And, you know, they just love the fight game. They love tough guys. And obviously Japan comes with that stigma of samurai warrior type thing. And they looked up at us, you know, being foreigners and having that ultimate respect over there too. So it was, you know, as much as you say, was it overwhelming? It became part of life. It became part of life, but it was never an expectation. The moment you made an expectation is the moment you'd be disappointed. Okay. So what? I'm not saying it wouldn't happen, but I'm just saying one of the things I learned, and through Graham also, is never expect. Work to achieve, but if you have an expectation, it doesn't happen, then in your life you feel like you failed.
You've disappointed.
Disappointing you, and then you look for answers. What the hell's that? Then you spend most of your time, and most of your efforts, and your train of thought wondering why it didn't happen, rather than let's worry about what's what's ahead.
What's ahead?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
it's a past for a reason. It's gone.
Yeah.
You know?
So you're saying that basically there was this obviously this milieu of fighters / celebrities who were obviously treated so well during that period of time that, you know, moving into that MMA world, having that transition, it was almost like, as you said, you were waving the K1 flag. You were like, you were part of this fascinating group of people and culture, fight culture, K1 culture. And now you're the representative in the MMA world, and you did quite well at the same time as well. I think you had majority wins as well.
I had the majority of wins. I had the majority of wins. But it was, as I said, it was just, when I say short-lived, it was just because of injuries, obviously at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Bottles were really riddled with injuries. And that's what I'm saying. The crowd see the end product.
Yeah.
No one sees behind the scenes, you know.
Yes. Was that K1's support base with you throughout that period as well?
They were, and I repeat that again, they were to an extent where it was a really tough year for fights. And when I say for fights, for K1 at the time, and they were leading into a big Grand Prix event. And I remember hurting my shin, but I had a hairline fracture through my shin, a fairly decent hairline fracture. And I remember the doctors here locally saying to me, hey, you know, if you don't pull up on this shin, it's starting to flex a lot. You're going to snap, and if it snaps, we're going to have to put a rod through it. And I had to sort of make the choice of whether to take 6 to 12 months off or continue to go through it. As far as the Japanese concerned, go through it.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
But breaks are breaks, no way. You know, I've got to look after them. I was at that point in my life then where I'd done all the big stuff, and
longevity was on your mind.
Yeah, and I was just trying to get a few more years out. And it was that particular time that I decided to take 6 to 12 months off, which ended up being 12 months. But during those 12 months is where I got a call from a friend of mine in America, Atlanta, Georgia, and offered me whether I wanted to do WCW, you know, World Championship Wrestling.
Was that Eric Bischoff?
It's Eric Bischoff at the time. Yeah. He was a mad martial art fan.
Oh, really?
Yeah, mad, crazy martial
I didn't
arts
know that.
fan.
Okay.
But it was a guy by the name of Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff, the late Paul Orndorff, who recently died a few years ago. They called me up and said, Sam, why don't you come over and trial for WCW? We're having these workouts, and it was a weekend test where like a camp where people go trial out and they just select whoever they want.
Yeah.
And I remember going, I agreed to go across, which I told K1, and K1 weren't happy. They were fucking dirty on me for going across.
Really?
But I just said to them, look, I'm not going over the kick. I'm still keeping active. I'm going to wrestle, but you know, I'm not going to do any other stuff. And they said, well, if you can do that, you can do this. But what they didn't understand was my shin was fucked. So I took that time off. I knew I'd end up going back to K1 eventually, and I ended up going back to Atlanta, Georgia. I did the trials over the weekend, and out of 74, I think 72 or 74 guys that went in there, I was the second guy to get picked.
Wow.
Yeah, so I signed a 3-year deal with WCW through Eric Bischoff. And it was a great meeting, face-to-face meeting with Eric Bischoff.
Yeah.
He was a fan of mine, and basically my gimmick was, you know, me, the Aussie, you know, from down under, and Thunder from down under, and that was it. And off it went from then, and had about 50 wrestling bouts all over America, and then I also toured in Australia with WCW and Save Goldberg in Sydney and a few others.
Oh, fantastic!
So I did all that, but it actually wrestling showed me the other side of fighting.
Yeah, right.
In the real world, it's me versus you. In the wrestling world, it's me and you versus the crowd.
Yeah.
Good guy, bad guy. It's about, you know, having him in the palm of your hand.
Yes, that's right.
You know, eating out the palm of your hand. So you're the entertainer.
You're the entertainer. Yeah,
so
it's theatre. It's theatre in a way.
And they do specialise a lot through training where they have you on camera, just snap cameras around and bang off.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
So during training, where you're training in and out, like I'd be in what they call the power plant and have four rings operating.
Yeah.
And then there'd be a studio room where you'll be training, for example, in the ring now, wrestling, going over different moves. And then for half a day, and the next half a day, you're working in front of cameras.
Oh, okay.
So they teach you that side of it because it's all about selling.
Yeah, it's workmanship.
Yeah.
You're trying to figure it out.
The whole rule of thumb with wrestling is once you've got the crowd in the palm of your hand, don't fucking drop them.
Yeah.
Keep them there.
Yeah.
So it's that good guy, bad guy story. So we tell the story.
Were you mostly the bad guy or the good guy?
I was always a good guy. Yeah,
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I turned heel.
Heel.
I turned heel for about 3 or 4. The fucking crowd hated me.
Yeah. Did you get the booze?
60-year-old lady wanted to hit me over the head with a chair and shit.
That's fantastic.
It was it was good, but it taught me a lot.
Did you think that it, I guess being, again, that transition from the combat world into sort of professional wrestling and the entertainment industry to a large degree, did you, I know you said that it gave you an insight into the other side of fighting, but what was it like, I guess, in the initial stages, again, going in there, were you just like, holy shit, this is completely different. This is, I'm an actor here.
Yeah, well, the thing is, the difference is you're pulling shots. You're pulling kicks, you're pulling punches.
Yep.
All the sound effects are all done. But what I did find hard was them gaining confidence that I wasn't going to hit them. They were more afraid of me collecting them.
Because you were an MMA
fighter. MMA fighter. Yeah. So we had to build that trust, and it took a long time. A long time because it's about selling. If in wrestling, if I throw a punch at you and you don't sell it well, doesn't matter how good that punch is, you're going to make me look like shit.
Yeah.
So
it's bad on you.
Yeah, we do use the term potato. When someone doesn't sell right, we just potato and you hit them properly, and then they force to sell.
I've seen a video of Brock Lesnar doing that a few times.
Yeah, well, Brock Lesnar did it with a knee to the head.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
So he got potato. He got hit hard. It was probably unintentional, but still.
Yeah.
And you've got to keep that level of script too, because you know how long you've got to wrestle for. The referee's wide up. He knows what's happening. So the good guy, bad guy is a winner, loser. It's a story. It's a soap opera. That's what wrestling's about. It's on a week-to-week basis.
That's it.
Yeah.
So it's crazy to see the trajectory of your career, where you've started as a boy in Brunswick, just getting into fights on the street or defending yourself. Getting obviously into the Kyokushin world, being wildly successful there, kickboxing, K1 in Japan, and then MMA, and then into professional wrestling. Was this now looking back, I guess the natural progression into what I guess a lot of people do know now, but perhaps it's again underrepresented, your acting career as well? Like Underbelly, being an Australian gangster.
It all folds into one another. If you have a look at the cycle of it, all folds into one another.
Yeah.
It's gone from raw basically standing up to full contact karate, to kickboxing, to MMA, to wrestling, and the entertainment starts already into acting, and acting's entertainment too. And it sort of flowed one into the other. I was very fortunate for a late friend of mine, which we lost, Richard Norton, not long ago.
Yes.
He's the guy that got me into acting back in 1993, 94.
Yeah.
I appeared on one of Bad Guy in one of his movies, and sort of never looked back after that.
Do you remember what the movie was called?
Yeah, Under the Gun.
Under the Gun. Okay. And there was a one later on with Ray Fazio.
Ray Fazio was Two Fists, One Heart.
That's it. Yeah. So and did you? Look, I'm only saying this because I'm an actor as well. But did you feel like when you got into that acting world as well, did you get the acting bug, so to speak? Did you feel like it was something that you wanted to keep pursuing? And I know you're pursuing it now.
Do you know? Yeah. No. You're right in what you're saying. Yeah. It's very easy to think you're an actor, but you and I know that the acting capacity in Australia, people who are full-time actors people who are full-time actors here in Australia, the unemployment rate is about 95%, if not more. So there's only 5% of Australian actors that do a full-time working. So what does that tell you?
Yeah.
So no, I kept level-headed. I knew, because I knew my primary source of income was my entertainment side, which was the fight side, and what I did outside that and my other businesses. Acting was just a bonus. But I'll never forget, I was on Scooby-Doo, playing the villain in Scooby-Doo, and I was working with Sarah Michelle Gellar and Freddie Prinze Jr. And there was days we'd be out in my caravan. I'd be waiting hours and hours and hours. And I go, Freddie, he walked past my caravan one day, he was reading a book. I go, what are you doing? He goes, I'm just reading, going for a walk. He goes, what are you doing? I said, I've been sitting in this fucking thing. Last 4 hours, they've been calling me, yes, we're coming, no, we're not. I go, how the fuck do you do this, man? I prefer to punch people up.
Yeah.
And he goes, Sam, it's quite easy. He says, you get paid to hang around, acting's a bonus.
Right.
Because that's the best.
You get paid for your time.
You get paid for your time. Acting's a bonus. If you get to act great, it's a bonus. And you know yourself. You could be on set for 8 hours and only work for 2.
Yeah. Or 15 minutes.
Or 15 minutes, exactly. Yeah.
And
depending on weather, depending on light, depending on this, there's so many variables on the acting stuff, and the setup is so great that I can understand how it costs a lot of money.
Yes. Yeah.
It takes an absurd amount of money.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but you know what? Like I said to you, if it wasn't for all that upbringing and those steps, I I probably wouldn't have got into the acting, and I tried it. I dabbled in it, enjoyed it. I had some great life lessons too from some of the greatest actors.
And potentially some more in the future, right?
There's one which we're looking at the moment in Europe, which I'm flying out to next week. So we'll have a look at that.
Beautiful.
It's a martial arts based movie. It's based on a semi-true story. So I've got involvement in that.
Fantastic.
From an acting and also from advisory also. So we'll wait and see see what they've got. I've read the script and it's quite intriguing. But it's never filmed in sequence, is it?
Of course, exactly.
It's all over the place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, look, we could talk for many, many more hours, but I do want to ask. It would be remiss of me to not ask this question, or the last few questions, I guess, surrounding your transition into the coaching world, the training world, obviously taking on Jimmy Crute, a fantastic UFC fighter, under your wing. If you could summarize, how has that process been so far for you, being with Jimmy and being a mentor again?
Well, first and foremost, I think one of the best things to give to the world of martial arts today is to give back. And I think with all my experiences throughout many, many years, 40 odd years, it'd be an unspoken rule if I didn't give it back. You've got to give back. And the best way I can give it back is through students, through potential students to become great fighters. And to me, life's all about knowledge. It's a library of knowledge. And I've got some great guys. I met Jimmy 10 years ago and coached him for 8 years. And now he's back with me again. Here's a guy that's gone from 0 up to, ranked 12 in the world. And obviously now he's come back a bit because he had a 2-year layoff. But he's come back to train. I've got a few other guys coming through the ranks at the moment. So to me, it's so enjoyable and it's so rewarding being able to coach people, and show them the right way to do it. And if I can avoid those potholes for them, I will. And I'm not saying by babying them, but I'm just making them aware of what it is. And today, life's about it's about making money. You do things because you love it, but you want to make money. At the end of the day, you can do something. You can do something you love and not make anything. Exactly where you are is where you're going to be in 10 years' time if you don't get up and go. So you got to make smarter choices. You got to make better decisions. My parents always used to say, show me your friends, I'll tell you who you are, and surround yourself with some great people. Rather than 10 blokes that say, let's go to the pub on a Saturday night, hang around with those 2 people, say, we've got businessmen who want to go to dinner and talk about business. Whether it helped today or help tomorrow, will help you eventually.
At some point.
It's very, very easy to get distracted in this world, and that's why coaches. I treat myself as a coach today, but coaches like Paul Fifield and those guys, they're great mentors. If you fucked up, they clip you behind the ear and say, mate, stop doing that. Pull your fucking head in, let's go.
And you need that sense of tough love.
Of course you do. Of course you do. And without that, I wouldn't be where I am today. And that's why I try and profess to the guys, that are up and coming today, you need that tough love. But unfortunately, we're dealing with society, and I hate saying this, it's a soft society. It's a soft society, but for all intents and purposes, but in my world, I still treat people the way they should be treated. Always treat them with respect. You've got a choice of doing it or not doing it. I'm not going to force you, because the fight game's an ugly game. It's a tough game. It's not for the faint-hearted. It requires a lot of, besides physical training, it requires a lot of discipline. Discipline meaning, shall I go with my mates or I've got training tomorrow morning? No, I'm not going to go with mates. I'm going to fucking train tomorrow morning, as opposed to going out, finishing late, then going training. That just puts you 2 steps back. So making better choices. So I'm just happy I'm in a position I'm able to give back now. To not just to Australia, but to the world, because I travel the world coaching. Give back something.
And what would you say, I guess, is well, practically in terms of something concrete, what is on the horizon for you now in terms of as a coach? Are there any things coming up now that you could talk about that in
look, I've got I just signed a 5-year deal last year or the year before with Europe, part of a big organisation called Senshi. Potentially could be the next K1, to be quite honest. They're owned by the guys, Shihan Ivanov is a billionaire, and but his foresight of what he wants, he will get. Because he's just brought in all the top K1 guys, all the old guys. He's brought us all back together. He was the only guy that'd be able to do it, obviously because of a financial thing, but he's brought us all back, and we're just reinvigorating this whole fight game again. And yeah, it's a process. It's in the making. We've been at it for the last 2-3 years. I've been there 2 years now. I've got 3 years left, but we're on the board also of his organisation. So it's enlightening, and it's quite reinvigorating to see someone pour money into something that he loves. It's his passion. It's not his primary business, but it's his passion for him. But bringing it back to life.
Well, does it get you fired up being in
Of
that
course,
mix,
it gets us fired up, because now it's not about us. It's about what we can produce as individuals. So the K1 boys, we're at a stage now where, we're told to create our own fighters.
Yeah.
And bring him in. So Peter Hurts will bring his in, Racef will bring his, I'll bring mine, and so on. So we start bringing back that K1 feel.
K1 feel.
Will it be ever as big as K1? Probably not.
Okay.
But could be bigger.
Yeah, that's right. As you said before,
That's what
don't be
I'm
like me, be better than me.
It could be bigger,
Yeah.
So, so that's my plans at the moment. I do that, and,
Fantastic. Final question I'll ask, because I know you have to go. We've got a good friend
Toss,
over
because
there.
I can't. Oh, sorry, we're still rolling. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. What would you say, and I asked this to one of another Fight Fit legend, Piero Scariotto, who's having a Masters championship fight next month here, actually. What would you say, if you could paint a picture for us, what would you say the image of success is for you at this point in your life?
The image of success for me, or for anyone, is optimum health. That's success. If you've got optimum health, if you've got a roof over your head, you've got clothes, you've got food on the table, you've got a car that can get you from A to B or public transport, health is wealth and success.
That's number one.
Yeah. It's money comes and goes. Sure, we all love money, and money makes the world go round, but it can't buy health.
No.
Because if it could, the Kerry Packers of the world would be alive today.
Yeah, that's right.
So I treat success, gone through a triple bypass, back in 2018, 2019. I'm talking from experience. I'd give everything up, to be healthy. Everything. Not that I'm not, I am healthy. I have a lot of war wounds. I get up every day, they remind me of fucking the hard slog that I've done, They remind me every single day, and I've had operations left, right, and center. But I'm still here today to tell the story, so that's the best piece of advice I can give people, is look after yourself now, because you're in this for a good time, not a long time.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, thank you very much. Sam Greco for coming on to the podcast, and we'll talk again soon.
No problem.
Thank you very much.